Courageous steps from little to big. This is a question, so I need a show of hands. Do you wear T-shirts that support your favorite causes? Anybody? Let me see. I figured maybe there would be a lot of hands. Do you keep them long after the cause has passed and continue to wear them? I have several that I feel that way about, and they're from 2017. One has a quote attributed to Mitch McConnell, who said in response to Senator Elizabeth Warren's opposition to the nomination of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, nevertheless, she persisted. That has many applications. And I still wear my T-shirt from the Women's March from January of 2017, when Penny and I, with some other friends, boarded buses from here to D.C. and back on the same day, it was very long, to participate in that large and wonderful event. Now, I have a person with whom I co-own my gallery, and she loves to wear T-shirts that advertise her politics and opinions. In fact, she told me she recently had to relocate her opinion T-shirts, separated from her other ones, because they needed their own drawer. I do have something to show you. I never thought I would wear the picture of an Episcopal priest on a T-shirt. And I doubt that she ever thought her picture would appear on a T-shirt that people would wear. And this is the Right Reverend Mariann Edgar Budde. And her claims to fame are not that she is tall or beautiful or rich or young. She is courageous. As was said in the introduction to my message, that after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, you will remember the Black Lives Matter movement was born, and protests erupted in the streets and also in Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. And protesters there were actually violently cleared from the streets. And then on June 1st of 2020, the president gave a speech in a rose garden and then proceeded with guards and military personnel across the street and on through Lafayette Square and onto the grounds of the St. John's Episcopal Church that had been the Church of the Presidents since it was founded in 1812. He stood in front of their sign without permission from the church to use their property, held a Bible upside down, and said before the nation, "This is a great country." And that's all he said. Now, Bishop Budde had no idea this was going to happen. She was outraged by everything that had been happening. And the St. John's Parish was part of her jurisdiction as the bishop of that diocese. What was she to do? Before she could censor herself, she spoke to the Washington Post, and she said, "The president does not speak for St. John's. We disassociate ourselves from the message, and we align ourselves with those seeking justice for the death of George Floyd and countless others." Well, as you can imagine, media began to pound down her door for more comment. So she went on CNN and other outlets, and she said, once again, "Let me be clear. The president just used the Bible, the sacred text from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and another church in my diocese as a backdrop to a message that's antithetical to the Christian message. And he has said everything to inflame violence. We need instead moral leadership, not division. Her words did not come out of nowhere, because she had been involved in the struggle for justice for a long time, since her earliest days in the ministry, really, when she still had little children at home and was a pastor in Minneapolis. She acquired leadership skills over many years, going to conferences, as many of us clergy do, and also consulting many experts in various fields. She studied spirituality from various religious traditions, and she learned about the history of those who kept courage in the face of trials. In other words, she filled her well. She filled her well and her own toolkit for survival in difficult times. So then after that particular experience, she reflected. The capacity to respond in a moment like that does not drop from the sky. Its significance is measured more by seasons of preparation. Seasons of preparation, practice, and intention. Making countless decisions that determine our capacity to be brave when called upon, or when we are summoned, not of our own choosing. The ultimate significance of times like this is not in the glare of the media spotlight, but is determined by how we live after those moments pass. The second big event for which she became well known occurred 5 years later in the Washington National Cathedral at a national prayer service after the president's second inauguration. Her sermon was a neat 15 minutes long. I admire that in a preacher. But it was the end of that event that spawned the outcry that stimulated the need for such a t-shirt as I now own and wear. She was called by the president a radical left hater who was nasty, not compelling, or smart. So keep that critique in mind when you hear what she actually said at the close of that message, addressing the president directly. Let me make one final plea. Millions have put their trust in you, and you have felt the providential hand of God. So in the name of God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people of our country who are scared now. They are gay and lesbian and transgendered, and their children are in Democratic, Republican, and independent households, and they fear for their lives. The people who pick our crops, clean our offices, who labor on poultry farms, who clean the dishes after we eat at restaurants, who work the night shifts in the hospitals. Now, they may not be citizens or have proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes. They're good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and synagogues and temples. So I ask you to have mercy. Have mercy on these communities whose children fear that their parents will not come home. Please help those who flee war zones and persecution in their own lands. For our God teaches us that we too were strangers in a strange land. So may God grant us the strength to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak truth to one another, to walk humbly with each other, for the good of all people, this nation, and the world. When I was reading this, I heard the echoes of what this congregation and other UU congregations say at the close of every single worship service. Do you hear the echoes of those words as well? I do. So now we have to try to distill all the things Bishop Budde has taught us. Because, unless the message of our T-shirts penetrates through the shirt into our hearts and minds, it really doesn't do a whole lot of good to wear them. In the book that she wrote, she uses the first analogy of a batter being up at the plate. I remember when my brother was in Little League and used to go to the plate, and we'd all line up and cheer, but we'd all be so nervous because it was his turn to bat. So sometimes when we're that one up at the plate, we're really nervous. And we forget we've got a whole team behind us. And that's why we belong to a community, right? Because there's times when we have to step up. It's good to know the team is with us. She also stressed that we make a lifetime of little decisions in the everydayness of our lives. And so in this we can learn the importance of things like the religious education that we support, because this teaches our next generations how to make these decisions, where we can mentor one another in small groups and discuss important ideas. Now, all the moments that we face like this are not necessarily public, but they still shape us, don't they? So it is in these quieter moments that we can prepare for the moment that we might be called upon to act in a more public way. One example of how this kind of mentoring actually works in a congregation happened to one of my art friend's daughters, who was also a Unitarian Universalist in Annapolis, Maryland. She joined the Social Action Committee there and found the calling of her life to work for justice through the UU Church. She now chairs that committee, and she's enrolled in the Star King Seminary, full-time. So the other clergy in that area around Annapolis have taken her under their wing and invite her to D.C. when they're going to do a protest. So this young woman now has been arrested 3 times and tied with zip ties because she sat in the Capitol Rotunda peacefully and quietly with the other clergy, UU clergy, who bravely stood up, and also sat outside of other buildings. So you can see how her being mentored in this way is life-changing, absolutely life-changing for her. Just think what the young people in your own congregation might do someday because you took the time to guide them and lead them. I know for me, being mentored by other, especially the few women in ministry, very few women in ministry I knew in the 1970s, who said, "Come with me to the meeting. We'll show you how we get things done around here." It made a big difference in my own ministry as well. Then Bishop Budde takes on the topic of perseverance. I don't know about you, but I stink at perseverance. It's just so hard. In the book, she cites the example of Madeline Albright. I don't know if any of you have read her memoirs and such. They're very inspiring. She was, as you remember, our first woman Secretary of State. Bishop Budde conducted her memorial service in 2022. What a big job, right? She read in her memoir that she said of herself, "I was never supposed to be what I became. I was never supposed to be what I became, so I had to hurry and catch up." That is a very modest statement from a woman who achieved so very much in her lifetime. Did you know she used to get up at 4:30 every morning? 4:30 every morning because she was raising her 3 daughters, helping boost her husband's career by volunteering in a number of organizations around Washington, and studying for her PhD, all at the same time. So she said, "I was a 25-year overnight success." Perseverance requires us to tend the fire of hopefulness inside. Okay, friends? The fire of hopefulness inside ourselves when outward circumstances do not reflect the results of our work. Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Nor does it look like from outward circumstances that a favorable outcome might be waiting in the wings. Because it's precisely at those moments when we need to dig deep and keep going. We can gain strength from our own communities, the team behind us. We can keep connected and tend one another's needs in times of care. And we can keep our eyes open for making even a little bit of difference right where we are. And we can counter our own discouragement by reading those historical accounts of people like Madeline Albright and many others who dealt with the challenges of their own times. There's so many people we could think of in that regard. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, maybe when all else fails, we just wear the shirt. Please try to remember, when you are discouraged, that it is your daily decision to practice your values that prepares you for times of crisis or opportunity that might come your way. Because, as Bishop Budde reminds us, it is simply our job to show up, to step up, and make our offering, despite its limitations, and our own. May it be so. Blessed be.